Story 1. It was a trite scenario, something so overdone that it managed to be both boring and ostentatious at the same time. The middle of a road leading to two opposite places, the forest or the hills. What'll it be? High sun over the hills or shadows dancing in the forest? Whistle of sharp wind grazing the peaks of the hills or two-bit chainsaw echoes within the forest? What'll it be? Elevation or seclusion, a higher grace or a darker enigma? What path will lead me to my best self, my best life? What'll it be? What a crock. It wasn't a magic sign. It wasn't some metaphor for life. No, that's just how it went when you found yourself all by your lonesome in a valley. You were always in the middle of two things. Two landscapes, two temperatures, two clouds, two sounds. Sounds were like mosquitoes, buzzing loud and quick, leaving no trace of where they actually landed until they'd already ripped into your skin and left behind itching, burning poison. I leaned against the hot metal of the Cadillac, gazing out into the dull sky and brooding over this. Valleys were a lot like hollers. I had grown up in dirt-poor hollers clear across the country from where I stood now. All in all, valleys and hollers were just drop-offs, wannabe holes dragging down the earth, confusing anyone's senses who entered. Whether it was Virginia, where I had come into the world, or Idaho, where I was now, it didn't make a difference. Two-stroke chainsaw magnifying in volume beyond those dying pines. I hated that bladed monster just about as much as I hated valleys and hollers and the never-ending two different ways to go scenario I kept finding myself in. An alarm beeped twice, faint from my hand. I looked down to see the 1% keeping hold on my cell phone's life fade out completely. Black screen, black mirror showcasing a new, tiny reflection of my face. I looked as tired and moody as I felt. The air got quiet then. No more chainsaw. Relief flooded through me, and I slowly got back into the car, wiggling in comfortably behind the giant steering wheel. A little natural noise I didn't mind, but human-made sounds were always unnerving, especially when you couldn't immediately see the source. Dead silence wasn't a welcome song either, as it usually signaled only one of two things: the aftermath of something terrible or the waiting for it. I put the old beautiful heap of automobile into gear and pulled onto the hot tarmac, relishing in the blowing dead air that posed as the 1977 Eldorado's AC. Maybe I was just being sensitive and dramatic about the whole dreaded sounds thing. After all, I had used both sound and silence to my advantage less than 48 hours earlier when I'd killed Andy. I'd stalked him quietly for weeks before and truly thought the murder itself would be carried out just as quietly. But I hadn't banked on Andy killing my best friend in the moments before it was his time to die. Homicide is a fickle thing. Anyone who's ever watched a true crime documentary or a slasher movie knows this. I couldn't for the life of me understand why I'd thought it would be any different in my own situation. The whole point of killing Andy was to get him the hell out of his wife's life before she was the murdered one. Andy's wife, Marlin, my best friend, Marlin, the well-renowned former astronaut scientist Marlin, who had a beautiful line of accolades following her everywhere she went. When people said her name, Marlin Boudreau, they corresponded it with all those insurmountable, brilliant achievements and skills. No one ever said Marlin Boudreau, beaten and battered wife of a real loser. I clutched at the cracked leather that wrapped the steering wheel, enjoying the way the frayed strands prickled my clammy hands. I clenched my teeth together, stared straight ahead as I drove towards my decided path in that moment, up to the forest. Anything remote was welcome. Any old forgotten place would do for Andy's chopped-up corpse. I was ready to dump him off already, get him as far away from Marlin as I could finally. I swallowed down bile back into my gas station coffee-coated stomach for the millionth time since I'd started this wild drive. I didn't give two shits about dead Andy. Nah, that didn't make me nervous one bit. It was what I had to do after, doing right by Marlin, respectfully giving her the send-off she deserved. Marlin Boudreau, The one-of-a-kind, too-good-to-be-true human in this world that everyone marveled after. That's how she had to be remembered. That's why I had to bring her along on Andy's disappearing act. That's why the world would never know what a monster Andy truly had been. No justice would exist because the truth wouldn't. Marlin didn't deserve to be dragged down with her torturer. I scoffed at myself. I was no martyr, no greatest all-sacrificing best friend here. I wasn't going to kid myself that I was as good of a person as Marlin had been. Hell, if I hadn't run off to the big city to escape the wretched Virginia holler in the first place, maybe none of this would have ever happened. But I'd abandoned my best friend, left the person I'd grown up with when she had needed me the most. No, I wasn't looking for my own laurels. Killing Andy, preserving a golden legacy for dead Marlin, was the least I could do for turning my back on a shit show that had become a bloodbath. Well, originally there wasn't supposed to be any bloodbath. Marlin would have been proud of my nerve. I'd chosen a symbolic way to take Andy out, something almost poetic. Loss of complete will, complete power. I hadn't totally thought the idea up myself, though. Fate had intervened casually on the television one Tuesday afternoon in the background as I'd waited on my Starbucks order at the counter. Scopolamine, a seemingly innocuous drug for motion sickness, could be rendered a most dangerous poison if an overdose was administered, turning the receiver into something of a literal zombie. A weird numbing of the brain that brought upon lack of will and a bot mental state in which the overdose party would do whatever he or she was told. The television at the Manhattan Starbucks was circling through the daily news, and a brief story ran about a man who had used scopolamine to aid in killing his wife. The details on how this man had actually done the murder itself hadn't mattered to me, because the beautiful thing about this scopolamine was that I would be able to choose whatever happened next. It was a godlike power that I could exercise, giving the necessity of what I would have to do deliciously satisfying in its own way. And boy, had it been. I smiled in spite of myself as I reminisced killing Andy, temporarily fogging away from the slow drive I was making up the valley and towards the forest. The perfect accessory to murder would lend itself in the form of a lactose-unfriendly casserole. There was always this weird cheese-laden corn casserole in the fridge at Andy and Marlin's house. It was Andy's favorite food, and a broken nose or busted-up clavicle might ensue upon Marlin if that frigid air was ever vacant of a giant glass baking dish of it. I had a key to the house, another perfect accessory. I'd had it for years. Marlin asked me not to tell Andy, so he never knew. Everything was easy. Getting into the house, poisoning the casserole, which had been fresh, by the way, watching it all unfold through the overgrown hedges by the back window. Easy. Andy and Marlin lived on a sprawling 10-acre lot, so neighbors, witnesses, were not an issue. It took less than half an hour for the drugs to hit Andy full force. He was at the bottom of the staircase when I walked inside. I remembered looking down at him for a good 60 seconds, studying the way his limp body rested at an odd position on the stairs, his ass plastered at the very bottom and his head 3 steps up. Andy was a big guy, tall, stocky, making it all the more cartoonish of a scene. The chainsaw was revving up again, but it was louder this time, and it was right next to me. I slammed on the brakes and whipped my head around to look at the empty passenger side of the car. Only it wasn't empty. I muttered the most offensive, albeit creative, expletives to the fresh, unexpected spectre now sitting beside me in the passenger seat. Buckled up and holding a vibrating chainsaw was Marlin. She stared down at that chainsaw in her hand, smiling slightly at the rapidly gyrating belt. And then, just as quickly as the chainsaw had revved, it disappeared from Marlin's hands, and she looked over at me, her long blonde hair swinging over her small shoulders. Marlin didn't say anything. Neither did I. What was there for me to say? What the hell are you? Why are you here? Your dead body is in the trunk of this classic peach clunker, so I know you're just a figment of my murdering imagination. How's heaven? Or hell? Or why the fuck do you have a chainsaw, Marlin? I looked ahead out the front window. I moved my foot from the brake to the gas and turned the steering wheel just enough to pull the Cadillac out of the road and onto the weed-covered shoulder. I put it in park, looked over at the passenger side seat again, expecting to find it empty. It wasn't. Marlin was still there, glistening beryl eyes, like she was about to cry. Marlin had always been a crier. Total opposite of me, who we'd used to joke didn't have tear ducts. This wasn't real. I wasn't so delusional. Yet there was an almost annoying symbolism in everything. The along-for-the-ride apparition Marlin opened her mouth to speak. No words came out, but I didn't need words. I knew the disappearing chainsaw had been a direct allusion to what I'd had to use to dismember Andy so that I could fit 2 bodies and corresponding evidence, i.e. a big-ass suitcase packed for a fake leave-it-all-behind scenario in the trunk. The sound of the 2-bit coming from God knows what direction from earlier. Not real. Another mirage of sound. I looked away from Marlin at my surroundings outside the car. I was thankful for a faux chainsaw. It meant the forest was as deserted and alone as it looked. No humans. Hopefully animals to devour Andy, but no actual creatures that could use a phone to call the cops. I caught a glimpse of an especially thick area of brush and trees and overgrown goodness. I stared at it for a moment, then turned the car off. This is where I'd dispose of Andy. The sky was undeciding and bleak as ever, but it had grown darker, so I assumed it must be nearing late evening. Between my dead cell phone and even more kaput car clock, I couldn't be sure. I got out of the Cadillac, walked around it, walked up the road a bit, walked back. No one was around. It was safe, and it was time. I had thought about going full Breaking Bad and just sloshing Andy's body in a vat of muriatic acid so I wouldn't have to dispose of anything. I also wondered if today's serial murderers used pop culture TV as much as I had with this killing. It was inevitable, right? But just securing the scopolamine alone was enough risk for me. That meant muriatic acid was out, so now here I was, about to dig a 9-foot hole. Not a 6, a kilink, maybe an 11 if the last cup of coffee kicked in at the right time, and I was only going to throw some bits of Andy in it. Then I would dirt it back up. Then I'd do it all over again, perhaps 5 more times. 9-foot holes were nothing in the scheme of things. The bigger picture was successfully hiding a monster forever, so that everyone back in Virginia would always believe the note I had left behind, the one that would be presumed to be in Malin and Andy's words. There was no dispute about the time of day it was once I was finished hours and hours later. It was dark out, nearly pitch black, except for an eerie moon right out of a horror film. When I walked back to the car, breathless but surprisingly barely dirty, another quip out of a horror film greeted me. 2 crows on the hood of the caddy. Crows. I found this curious, not unnerving. Maybe because I realized in that second that I'd never actually seen a crow in person before. I closed my eyes, shook my head, opened them again. The crows were gone, and I smirked knowingly. Just another figment of my imagination brought on by all this bullshit traumatic mess. My brain really was taking me for a ride today. I got back into the car, breathing a bit easier, but now faced with 2 ways to go, as usual. Ghost Marlin was in the passenger seat again. No chainsaw this time. That was nice. I turned the key in the ignition, glancing down at the black screen of my cell phone that rested on the center console. I didn't know why. Of course, it would still be dead. I looked up at the rearview mirror, straightened it, and threw the car around suddenly, nearly taking it on 2 wheels and leaving a deafening screech on the pavement as I headed back in the direction I'd come, the way of the hills this time. And despite the phantom just to my right, I found my mind wandering off again within seconds. Standing over Andy's drugged-up state on the stairs hadn't brought upon any hesitation in finishing the job, but I had found myself wanting to just stand there and stare down at him forever. The tyrant had become the helpless victim. Oh, what a beautiful scene. When I had finally snapped out of my own trance, I'd kicked Andy in his side until he came to. His eyes were glazed over like a pair of hot, drippy donuts, but he was still mobile, and I had leaned down, clutched at his arm, and directed him to stand up. I tugged with all my might. I was stronger than most women my age, not because of a size advantage, but because I was a lifetime athlete. Along with Andy complying and shakily pushing himself off the stairs, I was able to get him to his feet. I gave him another order to walk to the back door of the house and out to the shed while I followed behind him. Andy wordlessly did exactly that, though his lopsided trudging was so slow that it truly was reminiscent of a nearly forgotten 1950s inflated zombie culture. I had my hand grasped around the handgun in my purse just in case, but we made it all the way out to the backyard shed with no resistance. Andy didn't even act like he was cognizant of who I was, or himself for that matter. We went into the shed, and I directed him to stand with his back against the far wall. He had done so, still donut-eyed, staring at me with no realization that he was doing so. This is when I had hesitated. I had wanted to make Andy suffer. I'd been this salivating sort of angry for the last 2 months, since the last straw had commenced and I had finally decided to end Andy. I'd shown up as a surprise for a weekend visit to Marlin, knowing Andy would be away on a business trip to leave the two old friends by themselves. It had been years since we'd seen one another in person. I had walked into a darkened home, a surprised Marlin at the kitchen table, a Marlin who was absolutely unrecognizable to me. Between her swollen-up face to black and blue chest to the casts on both her left arm and right foot, there was no question in my mind who had done this. Marlin may have refused to admit it or talk much about it, but I didn't need any confirmation from her. I was going to save my friend who couldn't find the strength to do it herself. I owed Marlin that much after abandoning her 5 years earlier. I would finally be the one to give Marlin her life back before Andy had the chance to wipe it out. But standing in front of this version of Andy, the one who'd been stripped of all his will, I had suddenly wondered which magic weapon that jingled around in my oversized purse would be best to use to kill Andy. The gun? Or the Drano? At this point, he probably wouldn't feel a damn ounce of pain, so shouldn't I go with the least messy? Yes. So that's exactly what I had done. Though one more satisfaction was owed to me, he would do it himself. I had handed Andy the bottle of poison and commanded him to drink it. He tipped his head back, swaying so suddenly that he nearly fell over and drained the entire little vial down his throat. When he was dead not even an hour later, I had gone back into the house to leave the typed note I'd constructed to Marlin from Andy. The one I'd originally planned to use that in no way had involved Marlin. The one that was a fake Andy telling Marlin that he was leaving her forever. Marlin would never know the truth about what had happened here. I would never have her burden that. But something had been off in the house. As I had walked towards Marlin and Andy's bedroom to leave the note there, a strong smell hit me out of nowhere. Rusty, chemical, violent. I remembered pushing open the door and falling to my knees in the kind of despair you only see in the movies that get nominated for Oscars. Malene was dead. Andy had murdered her right before I had arrived with my diabolical plan. But I couldn't see it. It was like my memory was forbidding me from reliving the trauma of discovering Marlin's dead body, blacking me out. Even after 2 days in the bright-hued El Dorado, driving across the country, being inside my own head deeper than ever before, that moment, that memory, it was lost to me. I sucked in my breath and abruptly halted the car, my eyes nearly bulging out of their sockets at the sudden sight before me. Children, teenagers, families, a whole gaggle of them, crossed the road in front of the Cadillac. Some of the parents shot me glares, annoyed I'd almost run into them. I didn't care. My eyes moved past them, and that's when I saw it. A carnival. I rolled the window down just a little, and everything hit me all at once. Music too loud, the greasy, intoxicating smell of funnel cakes, so delicious you'd eat them until you couldn't stand. The carnival. The place I first met Marlin all those years ago. The air was thick with nostalgia. That loud squeak cut through the night, and my gaze followed it instinctively. An old Ferris wheel. It looked just like the one from back then, at the carnival where two best friends had met for the first time. And suddenly, I realized something. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air was being sucked out of me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles felt like they might burst through my skin. I lowered my head to the wheel, trying to focus, trying to understand why I couldn't catch my breath. I felt the weight of my eyelids heavy as anvils. My vision blurred. I gasped, trying to inhale, but there was no air. My throat closed up, and I clawed at it, desperate for relief. And then, a bird made a harsh sound nearby. A cork. Number A crow. My mind was spinning, but I couldn't figure out how much time had passed or why the horn of the caddy wasn't blaring. I must have passed out, but when my eyelids fluttered open again, I realized I wasn't hunched over the wheel anymore. I was lying flat on my back. No. What was happening? My heart hammered in my chest. I had to get Marlin's remains to northern Idaho, that little town she loved. That town we had found together when we were 18, before everything turned to shit. I couldn't afford to lose focus. Not now. I tried to move. Nothing. I was paralyzed. The air was different now. Rusty, chemical, violent. The smell of grass, sharp in the night air. I looked up, trying to make sense of it all. A clear sky stretched above me, stars glittering, no moon anymore. My breath came in short, labored gasps. I could taste blood. Something beeped in the distance. My cell phone. Low battery. That was impossible. My phone had been dead for hours. I didn't even have a charger. Then I saw her. A figure leaning over me, blonde hair framed by the night, her face almost hidden in the shadows. Her hands were full. One held a rag, the other a buck knife. Her eyes... betrayal. I wanted to reach for her. Marlin. It was her, wasn't it? But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was trapped. I shut my eyes, willing myself back to reality. But I didn't go back to the car. Instead, I was back in Marlin's bedroom, my knees buckling beneath me, a rag pressed against my mouth. I tried to hold on to something, anything, but I was fading fast. My vision blurred, and there she was, Marlin, crouching in front of me, shaking her head. She was smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a knowing one, a cruel one. A knife flashed in the air. I felt it cut into me. My hands, my arms, my stomach. The pain, unbearable. And then, everything went black. I gasped, choked, sputtered. My body jerked, trying to fight against the suffocating darkness. Marlin's voice. I heard her up above like she was standing over me, her words disconnected, full of something sadistic. I'm sorry, but had this coming. You don't know anything. My truth. Your truth. The truth. You left me. 5 years is a long time. You did this to yourself, Keller. I opened my eyes again. The backyard. Marlin knelt beside me. Her blouse was soaked in crimson. I could smell it. Rust, iron. The shed was just yards away, the place where Andy's body lay. I tried to speak, tried to apologize, tried to explain myself, but no sound came. Even my dying breaths were barely audible. My vision faltered. I saw movement on the roof of the shed. 2 crows. There had never been a second note. No frantic packing, no chopping up Andy with a chainsaw, no shoving him into the trunk of the El Dorado. And then it hit me. The horror of it all, the truth that I had been running from, trying to escape. My chest tightened again. The world blurred, spinning, and then everything went black. Silent. Dark. I felt the vibration in my hand. Slowly, I opened my eyes. My cell phone was buzzing, the screen flickering with a name I hadn't seen in years. Marlin. I looked around. The carnival, the lights, the colors, music too loud, funnel cakes, crowds moving past me, laughing, talking, heading for the rides. I felt a light touch on my arm, and when I turned, I saw her, Marlin, standing there. She smiled at me, her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't place. She pointed up at the Ferris wheel, and I followed her gaze. The wheel squeaked as it turned slowly. We laughed together, our eyes meeting. The world felt simple again, just the two of us. No past, no regrets, just us. I glanced down at my cell phone, then back at Marlin. I held up the keys to the Cadillac, motioning toward it. She nodded, looping her arm through mine. Just us. No one left to blame. Story 2. I say let the world go to hell, but I should always have my tea. Summer, 1992, 7th cup. The tea still works, even though it shifts and alters more than it should. My skin is tighter, I feel it around my chin and my collarbones, but it takes curious forms here and there, either too smooth or too sharp. The first time it happened, I barely noticed. I was blinded by relief, youth. I don't recognize my own reflection anymore. Now my patience wears thin where it once stretched long. My thoughts move too quickly and my moods shift without warning. The hours of morning I used to cherish agitate me. It's like I'm trapped in time, not freed from it. Next time I'll use more leaves, just to make sure. The walls are covered with vines that follow the delicate pattern of bricks, seeping through gaps in the mortar and peeking inside like intruders. The house stands like a forgotten relic, with its green tapestry of tendrils creeping along the windowsills, curling around the hinges and swaying gently in the breeze. Some vines have grown so thick they form a canopy over the sagging porch, casting shifting shadows on the creaking wooden floors. On the side, the chimney peeks out from the greenery, barely visible beneath the stubborn embrace of ivy. It's a house where nature has reclaimed its place, where the edges of time are blurred and cloudy. At the start of spring, the lilies flower, and through the door left ajar you can see a bouquet placed carefully on the table. If you turn right, through the air that carries the earthy scents of the vines, you'll find yourself in the parlor, where furniture sits like forgotten ghosts of another era. An armchair draped with quilt, a table so old its scratches look like wrinkles, books with cracked spines and yellowed pages scattered across a shelf leaning slightly to one side. Moss clings to the edges of the fireplace. From here you'd go through one of the two doors and end up in either the bedroom or the kitchen. The bed, centered in the middle of the room, has chipped paint coming off its iron frame. The blend of abandonment and charm that is the kitchen has mismatched jars of spices and dried herbs lined on shelves, and next to the sink, a cast iron kettle that rests on a stove, pulsing with a strange vitality. Its lid always seems to breathe with soft metallic sighs, an ancient creature that seems to know every secret whispered within the house. This altered slice of forest belongs entirely to me, Dorothy, an old lady whose only company is the house itself. I've lived here for as long as anyone can remember, a quiet but constant presence on the edge of the world. My wiry frame, draped in shawls, moves slowly through the vine-covered walls, my hands always stained with the green of crushed herbs or brewed teas. Depending on who tells the story, I might be a herbalist, a healer, or even a witch, but for those who don't like to indulge in the grasps of fiction, I'm just a lonely old woman. The solace I find in nature helps me cope with the sadness and grief brought by age. My thoughts often spiral into the past, replaying moments from my youth that are long gone. The forest becomes my refuge, a place where my grief feels less sharp, where I can lose myself in the rustling of leaves overhead. It makes me feel small in the most comforting sense, like a child again, cradled by something much larger than myself. Each time I am surrounded by the vibrant green and the hum of insects, I feel life and youth pumping through my veins. It makes something inside me ache, deep and primal. It is as if I want to consume the forest whole, swallow its wildness and vitality, and fill the hollow place within me that grief has carved. In this warm embrace, I can almost forget all the heaviness I carry. Almost. April 23rd, 1952. First cup. I don't know what to expect. Perhaps a little more energy and ease in my joints. I can see the plant standing outside my window, unfazed, as if it didn't just surrender something so life-changing to me. I don't expect miracles because that would be foolish. If I wake up tomorrow and feel the way I did 10 years ago, even 5, I'm at that age when even the slightest noise troubles my sleep. So when I hear the soft, almost rhythmic rustling, I get up immediately. It's not the sharp sound of wind, nor the familiar clattering of branches or leaves carried on the breeze. I stretch, my eyes still heavy with sleep, and gaze out through a gap in the curtains. There, growing just outside the window, is a plant nestled against the weathered stone wall, claiming the place as if it has always belonged. Except it didn't, I think. Its presence feels almost magical, with white blossoms that stand out like tiny stars, delicate and almost too perfect. I get my shawl and go outside to get a better look. The closer I step, the quicker my heart beats. As I pull my hand away from the plant, I feel an odd, sudden shift. Something within me has been gently untangled. I look down at my palm, and instead of the familiar creases that have accumulated over the years, I see skin so smooth, almost unmarked, as if just that part of my body has slipped away in time. The wrinkles, the evidence of age that has clung to me like a malady for so long, have vanished, replaced by the soft texture that I haven't known in decades. In the stillness of night, I can't help but wonder, has the plant done more than just grow? Has it reached into me and drawn something out, something almost rotten? And if yes, can it do it again? A strange surge of impulse sweeps over me. I reach toward one of its thick, twisting branches, curl my fingers around it, and with sudden determination and strength, snap it off. The leaves rustle in protest, but the plant itself makes no other sound, no objection, no struggle. Start off by boiling the water, 4 cups over medium-high heat, which you then pour over about 1 tablespoon of leaves and steep to the desired strength before straining. The quantity of leaves influences the end result. Taste, smell, years turned back. So beware. Add sugar if needed and stir until completely dissolved. Pour into a cup and drink. I set the teapot on the table and rest my hands on the worn surface. The silence in the room seems to stretch, as though the whole house is holding its breath. When I pour the hot liquid into my cup, the smell is sweet and inviting. Before lifting the cup to my lips, I let my gaze drift back to the smooth skin of my palm. It seems impossible, and for a second I think it might all be a dream, a mirage created by my sleeping self. But there it is again, the freshness of youth staring back at me, all too real. As I take my first slow sip, the light of dawn creeps through the curtains, casting a pale golden glow across the room. A ray of sunlight slips past the table, past the jars with their faded labels covered in a layer of dust, and kisses the edge of the cup. After downing its contents, I can't help but smile. Years pass, the world shifts and reshapes itself. Time has forgiven nobody. It sheds its old skin and keeps emerging in a new form, always moving forward. Seasons mark their passing in the slow dance between life, death, and rebirth. The forest stirs from its slumber each spring, deepens its song in summer, catches its breath in autumn, and goes to sleep at last, in winter. Outside my house, the plant stands tall, its leaves shimmering in the sunlight, vibrant and green. It doesn't wither in the cold or droop in the heat, and while the trees around it shed their leaves, the plant turns a deeper shade of green, as if to mock the cycle of decay that governs everything else. Something so human, so terrestrial, this idea of age, is never a threat to its well-being. I witness these changes through both joy and sorrow. I am always there, a still point in a spinning universe. Each time I pluck a fresh leaf, I feel a rush of vitality fill me, the years peeling away from my skin. My reflection shows a face far younger than I have any right to possess. 1 cup, 2 cups, 3, 20, 100. It is easy to lose track of time. The cycle of day and night becomes meaningless. Days and hours and minutes are nothing compared to the eternity locked behind my eyes. Instead, I measure the passing of time by watching the plant diminish before my eyes, wondering how long it has left before turning into withered twigs. Will it one day simply stop growing altogether? Will I steal its essence until we both shrink, one no longer thriving at the other's expense? 132nd cup, I used to think highly of the plant, how time doesn't affect its leaves or flowers, but I'm not so sure anymore. The tea makes my stomach turn. I drink it anyway. What's the alternative? But every sip feels like a chore. I miss the sweet taste it once had. I don't even want to think about the possibility of it dying. Maybe it already is, and I just don't let myself see. The earth beneath my feet is dry and cracked, reflecting nothing but decay. Around me, the world is lifeless. Even the birds, creatures that once filled the mornings with their song, have long since vanished. Only silence remains. At the center of this desolation stands the plant, at least what is left of it. Its branches are brittle and twisted, no longer covered by the lush leaves that once crowned it in green splendor. I kneel before it one last time, my hands trembling as I reach out to touch the withered frame. I can feel it, the final breath of life, and I know in the ache of my bones, in the faint lines that have begun to reappear on my hands yet again, that this will be all over at last. Time, it seems, has finally caught up to me, and yet I can't resist taking this one more gift. Carefully, I pluck the final few leaves from the plant's skeletal frame, thin and fragile like paper soaked in water. In the kitchen, I light the fire and set the battered kettle on the stove. The water boils slowly, keeping the moment alive for just a while longer, this last ritual that I'm unwilling to let go of. I drop the leaves into the cup, watching as they unfurl, filling the air with the earthy scent tinged with a faint bitterness I can't recall. It smells of death. I carry the cup back to the garden, standing among the ruins of my once vibrant wood, the plant motionless behind me. I hesitate for a moment before raising the cup to my lips and drinking slowly. The warmth spreads through my body, but the feeling is different this time, heavier, less vibrant. My hands do not change, the lines on my face remain. The tea has nothing left to give. Behind me, the plant makes a soft, cracking sound, and when I turn, I see it collapse in on itself. Its branches curl inward, its roots shrink, pulling away from the earth until there is nothing left but a blackened patch of soil. It is gone, completely gone. As I stand in the silent, dead garden, I feel a strange sensation stir within my chest, faint at first and then growing stronger, deeper, spreading through my body like the vines on the house. When I clutch my arms, panic rising in my throat, I feel my skin softening, thinning, veins emerging beneath the surface like the ridges of a leaf. My legs tremble and I fall to my knees, the cracked earth beneath pressing into my bones. I can't rise back up no matter how hard I try. I am shrinking, folding into myself, rooting into the soil as if I am being claimed by it. Swallowed. My hair begins to tangle and grow wild, sprouting into long, twisting vines that cascade down my back and over my shoulders. I want to scream, but my words cut off, muffled by the sound of creaking wood emerging from my throat. It is as though the forest is taking back the very life I have drained from the plant over centuries. I have stolen, and now I must give. That is my last thought before my human form erases itself completely. I stand now, elegant and tall, my branches twisted upward toward the pale sky. I gave up on trying to regain my human beauty, but I mourn it still, while my leaves sway gently in the wind. From a distance I appear flawless, a vibrant plant in contrast to the barren garden. As you get closer, though, you start to notice the rot and ruin on the tips of my leaves, how they curl inwards, as if in their attempt to grow they lost their strength halfway. They whisper of a decay I cannot escape, no matter how deeply my roots have sunk into the soil. Story 3. Haiti, why can't we go into the woods again? I asked, my voice curious as I got into bed. I pulled the covers over myself as I lay down. My mother gave me a small smile and helped me settle in. The moonlight cast a soft glow through the window. The woods are very dangerous, she answered, sitting on the bed. And they hold a great evil within that preys on people. I looked at my mother with curious yet confused eyes. The Neki live there, she supplied at my look. The Nadi? I asked curiously, causing my mother to let out a small chuckle. Naki, she sounded out. They are water spirits that live within a lake at the center of the woods. They look friendly and beautiful, but they are not. They are shapeshifters that lure you to them. When you are within their grasp, they drag you down with them into the water where you can never leave. I gasped in shock at my mother's words. Never? I asked. Never. Once they have you, they eat you, she finished. My bright emerald green eyes were wide with fear. Promise me, Alexei, that you will never go into the woods, my mother fiercely asked, her own emerald eyes pleading. I looked at my mother. I promise, I told her. My mother gave me a kiss on my forehead and bid me good night. This legend of the Neki is one the mothers of Eldmere, Finland, have always told their children. Stay out of the woods, lest the Neki will take you away forever. As children, we held the legend with childlike contempt. They scared us enough to where we listened, but we were still children. We would tease each other at school the next day. One of us would pretend to be the Neki and chase the rest of us around at recess. As we grew older, we realized the legend was just a story, a fairy tale mothers told their children to make them behave and stay out of the woods. And as time went on, we stopped believing. Alexei, Gareth and Mackie are here, I heard my mother shout from the front door. I quickly stuffed the rest of my corvapusti into my mouth. Licking cinnamon off my fingers, I quickly grabbed my bag and headed to the front door. I could see my friends waiting at the bottom of the steps. I'll see you later, Eti, I said, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. Before I could step out of the door, she grabbed me by the arm. Alexei. Yes? I sighed, already knowing what was about to happen. Gareth and Mackie looked up at us, also knowing, before heading to the end of the walkway. I turned my attention back to my mother. Have fun, she started. Her grip on my arm got tighter. And please do not go into the woods, she pleaded. I know, I told her, my voice coming out a bit harsh. She flinched slightly, causing me to sigh. Olen pahoilani, Eti, I said as I embraced her. She smiled softly and gave me a gentle pat on the cheek. I know you get tired of me telling you this, Poikani, but I just want you to be safe. I know, Eti, I promise, I told her. Her bright eyes searched mine for a second before nodding her head. I'll see you tomorrow, she told me. Giving her another kiss on the cheek, I left the house and walked towards my friends. Are you ready? Gareth asked, a wide smile on his face. His dark, russet brown eyes sparkled and his broad shoulders hummed in excitement. I looked at Mackie with a raised eyebrow, to which he shrugged his shoulders. You're pretty excited, huh? I asked as we walked down the road. The streets were slowly dying down as people packed up their vendors for the day and started making their way home. The sun's descent painted the sky with pink, orange, yellow, and purple. Of course I'm excited. This meteor shower is the most exciting thing to happen in this town since Mrs. Larty got caught sleeping with the mailman by her husband, he stated, causing Mackie to snicker beside me. You can't tell me you're not excited about seeing an actual meteor shower, Gareth stated, looking at me. I am, I told him. Eldmere was almost completely surrounded by woods and was a small town compared to others in Finland. With less than 300 people here and 3 stoplights, there wasn't much to do. He then looked at Mackie. With a roll of his cornflower blue eyes, he gave Gareth a nod. It is exciting, and it's nice to get out of the house, he told him. Is your mom still fighting with your sister? I asked him. When are they not fighting? He sighed. It's gotten even worse over the past couple of months with Ein's new boyfriend, who I'm pretty sure she's dating just to irritate Mum. Ein was a little over a year younger than Mackie and had always been difficult. She seemed to crave getting into trouble. The arguing has gotten bad enough to where Dad has been staying in the den when he's not at work, though now it's more of Mom shouting and Ein ignoring her, he finished with another sigh. Well, this will be a good distraction, Gareth tells me with a pat on the back. It doesn't take us long to get to the creek. A bright burning fire flickers, lighting up the area. Music fills the air, and drunken teenagers stumble around. The sound of the rushing water can barely be heard over the excited shouts. A quick glance at my watch shows we still have about half an hour before the shower is supposed to start. We head over to the fire and relax, something we haven't really been able to do lately. I'm talking to a classmate when bright lights flicker across my sight, causing me to look up. The sound of excited cheers and shouts fills the air as the meteor shower begins. It is quite a beautiful sight. Streaks of light shoot across a star-filled sky. Wow, this is amazing, Mackie states in wonder, the first genuine smile I've seen in weeks settling on his face. Before I can agree with him, I feel Gareth pull on my sleeve. Isn't that Ein with colour? He asks, pointing off to the side. Following his finger towards the creek, I spot the familiar long blonde hair of Ein. She's holding Callas, a teen of questionable motives, hand as they step into the creek. Are they going into the woods? I ask. Ein, Mackie shouts, but she doesn't hear him. With a scowl on his face, he runs towards them. Gareth and I look at each other before chasing after him. By the time we reach the edge of the woods, the 2 teens have already disappeared inside. Mackie shouts her name again, but there is no response. He takes a step forward, causing Gareth to grasp his arm. You're not seriously thinking about going into the woods? He asks, voice incredulous. Out of all of us, Gareth's mother is the most superstitious, driving into his head about the evil that lives within. I can't just leave her in there, especially not with him, Mackie states. His voice is hard, but a tiny tremble reveals his fear. He's right, Gareth, I start, walking up beside Mackie. Besides, the necky is superstition, just something our mothers made up. We'll be fine. He still looks hesitant, but he steps forward with a nod. Together, the 3 of us enter the woods for the first time. The trees seem even more daunting up close. They stand tall, with moonlight filtering through their thick foliage. Our phones offer more light. As we walk through, a heavy sense of foreboding fills me. I feel like we've made a mistake entering the woods, but it's too late to turn back. Mackie continues to yell for Ein, his voice echoing. The only other sound is the fallen leaves crunching under our feet. Am I the only one silently freaking out? Gareth whispers. I go to respond when I hear something. I quickly shush both of them and put a finger to my lips. A couple of seconds pass when I hear the sound again, a sound almost like screaming. My eyes lock with Mackie's for a split second before he takes off. With a curse, we quickly follow him. The screams are getting closer and louder. Ein! Mackie shouts loudly. Mackie! She shouts in return, her voice right next to us. Suddenly, Gareth goes down as something collides with him. He groans as he lands on the ground with a thud. I quickly shine my light, revealing Gareth's pain-filled face and Ein's frightened one. "Ein!" Maki shouts, going towards her. He gathers her in his arms as sobs rock her frame. Leaves and twigs stick out of her wet hair. Mud and blood cake her pale face. There is a bleeding gash on her forehead, and small cuts litter her skin. Her clothes are torn, bloodied, and drenched in water. "Ein, are you okay? Did Kala do this to you?" Maki asks frantically. She shakes her head, her body still trembling. No, Kale didn't do this," she stutters out. I take off my jacket and wrap it around her shoulders. "We have to get out of here." She tries to stand up, but her shaking legs force her back down again. "Take it easy," Maki says. She grabs his arms in a fierce grip. "We have to leave right now," she growls out. Her voice has stopped shaking. "It's coming." "Hein, what are you talking about? What happened to you?" "They're real. The Neki, they're real," she tells us. The last part a whisper. "They can't be. It's a store." Maki replies. "It killed Kala," she interrupts, casting us into silence. "Dragged him into the lake, kicking and screaming, and tore him apart." She pulls down the collar of her shirt, revealing a deep bite mark that definitely does not look human. It almost got me, but I got away somehow. I look at Ein, not quite believing my ears. The story my mother always told me was real. Suddenly, an inhuman screech fills the air, causing us all to freeze. More screeches fill the air and are steadily growing in volume. "It's coming," Ein whispers, her pale blue eyes widening in fear. I quickly help her stand, the screeches getting closer. "Run!" I shout. I grab Ein's hand and head in the opposite direction that she came from, Maki and Gareth right behind us. Bushes and low branches cut into my skin, but I pay them no mind, focused only on getting out of the woods. "This can't be happening. This cannot be happening," I hear Gareth state in a breathless voice. "We just have to make it out of the woods," I tell him when suddenly the screeching is right beside us. Before I can say anything, a black mass rushes at me, knocking me down. I feel pain as my body hits the ground. I'm disoriented at first, but my vision clears, revealing sharp teeth coming towards my face. I quickly kick my feet out, sending it away from me. Grabbing the closest thing to me, a thick stick, I scramble to my feet. The Neki has taken the shape of a beautiful, naked woman. Its hair is long, white, and drags upon the ground. Blood stains its pale skin, and its eyes are black as night. It flicks its attention between the four of us, as if deciding who to go after first. The dark orbs settle on Ein, and a cruel smile stretches across its face. With fingers clawed, it races towards her. I use the stick and smack the Neki across the face. Before it can get its bearing, I hit it again, forcing it back. I go to hit it once more when it grabs the end of the stick and rips it out of my hand. It then wraps its hand around my throat, lifting me into the air. I try to pry its hand off, but it is too strong. I hear Maki shout as he runs towards us with a stick of his own. The Neki easily knocks him away and brings its other hand towards my left arm. It takes my arm and brings it towards its mouth. I try to resist. Suddenly, pain shoots up my arm as the creature takes a bite. My scream fills my ears and the air. Taking its mouth away, the Neki looks at me with a blood-stained grin. Then it goes for my shoulder, its sharp teeth tearing into my skin. The pain is absolutely excruciating, and I can feel it through my entire body. My body weakens, and black spots fill my vision as it continues to feed from my flesh. The shouts of my friends echo in the background, but I know it's useless. I'm going to die tonight. All I can think about is my mother and the fact that she will be heartbroken. "I'm sorry I didn't keep my promise, Ati," I think as I start to fade out. Suddenly, the teeth and pressure around my throat are lifted. As I fall to the ground, I gasp and cough as air rushes back into my lungs. A screech fills the air once again, but this one is filled with pain. Still weak, I can only lift my head a bit to see. Another screech reaches my ears, even louder and longer than the last. The Neki is on the ground with several arrows sticking out of it. Still screeching, it tries to crawl away, but another arrow finds it. This time it pierces what I believe to be its heart, causing it to go quiet. A sense of peace fills me at the creature's silence. I may be dying, but at the very least my friends will be okay. As I begin to black out, familiar emerald green eyes lock onto my own. The smell of lilac fills my nose, and soft hands caress my face. 80, I whisper. I see a small smile settle on her face. Olen Pahoy Lani, she states softly, tears running down her face. I told you to stay out of the woods. I know. I'm sorry, I tell her. Rest, she says. I close my eyes and surrender to the darkness. Story 4. Prelude. The rain pounded against the small stone home outside of the city of Corinth. The storm raged and the winds howled, but I couldn't bring myself to acknowledge the storm's presence. All I could feel was the warm radiance of the god laying in bed next to me, his powerful arms wrapped around my body, making me feel safe and secure in the home. You, more than any other mortal, have captured my heart, Zeus said sleepily, a smile on his face as he gently stroked the hair out of my face. My heart is yours, now and forever, my lord, I replied, reaching up and kissing his face gently. I was the most beautiful woman in the village, my golden hair and sun-kissed skin making me desired by all. I was also known to be favored by the gods, most notably Zeus, who had arrived at my home in the midst of a storm similar to the one playing out now, in the guise of a giant eagle. For you and only you, my love, I am not your lord, I am your love, as you are mine, Zeus replied, his muscular frame flexing under my soft touch as he moved his mane of curly black hair from his eyes. He found my lips with his own and began to kiss me softly at first, gradually becoming hungrier as we both felt the throes of passion overtake us once more. So this is where you've been sneaking off to, my darling husband, a voice beckoned. We both jumped at the sound, and Zeus strode forward in the room, anger blooming in his eyes. Who dares disrupt us? He demanded, before recognition took hold in his eyes. Do you not recognize your wife, O mighty Zeus? Hera asked, stepping out of the shadows as her own golden glow began to radiate the room. Long flowing red and gold hair hung down her back, and the white sash she wore revealed her toned and athletic body, one bestowed upon all of the gods. Hera, what is the meaning of this? Zeus asked. You have the audacity to feign anger at me, husband. You, who have left the world with more bastard children than can fill a temple in my honor? How ridiculous. And to debase your godhood by laying with this mere mortal. Why, that is beyond dishonor. You should feel shame. Shame for what? For loving and being loved. You forget your place, Hera. I am the king of the gods, and you will show me the respect I deserve. Save the melodrama for when we return to Olympus. You and I both know that you and I have equal power. In fact, let me demonstrate, Hera replied, pushing past her husband and towards the bed, where I still held my white sash to my naked form. My goddess, forgive me. I did not. I began to say, but my words fell short as I stared upon the beautiful goddess standing before me. I'm sure you felt obliged to heed your feelings, especially in the presence of my divine husband here. Yet an example must be made, and you sadly must pay the price for my husband's mistake. I pity you, mortal. Your mortal life is now at an end, and only hell awaits you, Hera replied. With the simple touch of her hand to my forehead, my life changed forever. I howled in agony as pain took hold of me. I could feel my skin peeling and cracking in places, while my hair fell out and my bones cracked. My teeth sharpened, and my ears grew pointed. and I felt my humanity shed off of me as easily as a wolf sheds its skin. "Zeus, my love, help me," I cried, my voice growing heavy and rough as my transformation continued. Zeus watched in horror as I twisted and turned into a hideous beast, and I could see the heartbreak in his eyes. Chapter 1. I woke to the bright light of a California morning streaming in through the blinds of the beach house. The soothing sound of the waves crashing on the shore nearby was relaxing, and I found myself fighting to stay awake. As I turned away from the bright morning light, I came face to face with Iris Walsh, my amazing girlfriend, and the world brightened once more. The weekend trip had come together perfectly. I'd surprised Iris with the weekend plans, and thankfully she had jumped at the opportunity. I needed a break from my latest novel, Baseline, and a weekend without answering another panicked call from my agent Helen was a welcome addition. Now in my 30s, I found myself drawn more to peaceful and romantic weekends rather than the party life that most 20-somethings craved for all week long. I'd been lucky to meet Iris in the first place. Iris Walsh was a 30-year-old photographer and makeup artist living in Los Angeles. I had been working on my book in a bookshop cafe and noticed her sitting at the table next to me. Her face was scrunched up as she studied something on her laptop, and I noticed she was drinking the same thing as me. I'd always been shy, so I hesitated to talk to her at first, unsure of what to say. As I worked on my book, I was surprised when Iris sat down on the couch next to me, setting her laptop down. I looked up to see her staring at me, and my heart immediately skipped a beat. Her emerald green eyes pulled me in, and for a moment, I couldn't think of anything else. "Sorry, the couch looked much more comfortable than the damn chair over there," she said, her Irish accent dancing in the air, teasing and enticing me like music. That's all right. Always plenty of room for a fellow vanilla latte drinker," I joked, hoping my face wasn't as flushed as I felt in that moment. I always felt awkward sitting next to a beautiful woman. As a heavy-set guy, I often worried that my appearance would be the only thing someone would fixate on when talking to me. Yet Iris was different. She never once broke eye contact with me. These vanilla lattes are delicious. I never had them back home, but damn, are they good. Is that an Irish accent I'm detecting? Where in Ireland are you from? Sandymount, a small village outside Dublin on the coast. Just moved here a couple years ago. Name's Iris Walsh, she introduced herself. Quinn Ford, I replied, and the rest was history, as they say. Now, as I looked into Iris's beautiful face and trailed my hand down her body, I could honestly say I'd never felt happier. Today was the day I had decided. Today, I was going to ask her to move in with me at my loft in LA. It had been a few months since we'd met, and she brought out the best in me. I just hoped she felt the same way, enough to say yes to the idea. "Good morning, darling," she said, smiling without opening her eyes. "How do you always know when I'm awake?" I asked, smiling back at her. "It's one of my superpowers, love," she replied, opening her eyes and smiling. "You are my superwoman. Did you get some good sleep?" "I always do when I'm next to you. What did you want to do today? Do you have to work?" "Nope. Today I'm all yours. I was thinking we could have a late breakfast, early lunch, lay on the beach, and then take a moonlit stroll along the beach before dinner. I thought we'd check out the caves near Pinnacles National Park. What do you say?" "I say that sounds like a plan. Want to take a shower first?" "You read my mind," I replied, following her out of bed as the sheets fell from our bodies and we ran into the bathroom, quickly shutting the door behind us. Chapter 2. It had been a whirlwind day for us. A hearty breakfast buffet followed by a long lounge on the beach in our bathing suits was the perfect way to spend the weekend. I could feel the anticipation building inside me, wanting the night to come so I could finally ask her to move in with me. My nerves were intense, but I kept telling myself that my instincts were right on this one. Yet as we lay together, Iris with her head on my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was bothering her. At times, she felt distant, almost like her mind was 1,000 miles away, but I didn't let that deter me. Instead, I told myself I was just psyching myself out and needed to push forward with the plan I had set for the day. As night descended, we walked hand in hand along the trail of Pinnacles National Park. The waves crashed against the rocks nearby as I breathed in the ocean air. "Today has been the perfect day," Iris said, her smile stretching into a grin as she looked up into my eyes. "It really has been," I replied, leaning down to kiss her softly. Before either of us could say another word, the night air was pierced by the sound of a low growl. We froze, our hearts stopping as we turned to see a large pair of red eyes staring at us from the darkness of the trail we had just walked. "Iris, we have to move," I said, my voice shaky with fear. "Whatever that thing is, it's blocking our path back to the car," she replied. "There's a cave nearby. If we can find some high ground in there, maybe whatever it is will move on. I don't have anything to fight it off with, so we have to take a chance," I said, urgency rising in my voice. "I feel like we're being cornered," Iris said, her voice trembling. "So do I, babe, but I don't think we have a choice. That thing is getting closer to us," I began to say. Before either of us could make a move, the creature stepped into the moonlight. We gasped in horror as a massive wolf, its tufts of black fur and pearly white teeth glistening in the light, walked toward us. Its eyes seemed to blaze with fire. Iris and I both turned to run, but as we did, we got caught on a large root, and the tumble sent us falling into the mouth of a cave below. I opened my eyes, and pain shot through the back of my head, stars exploding behind my eyelids as I slowly returned to consciousness. The world around me was blurry, but I could make out the outline of a large fire burning in front of me. I swatted at the cobwebs in my memory, trying to clear my head. As my vision started to clear, I realized I was lying inside of a large cave. I could still hear the crashing of the waves coming from the mouth of the cave, and the memory of being chased by the wolf flooded back to me in a rush. "Iris!" I shouted, trying to sit up, but another sharp pain shot through me. Before I could move again, a cold marble-like finger pressed gently against my lips. "Shh, hush now, babe. It's all right now," a soothing voice called out. I looked over and saw Iris crawling toward me. She looked like a vision of beauty as always. Her flowing white satin dress and porcelain skin seemed to glow in the firelight, and her piercing eyes held mine as she slowly climbed over me, straddling me and gently wiping the hair from my face. "Iris, are you all right?" My voice sounded distant, as though it were coming from far away. "We're both okay, my love. Just be here with me now," she said simply, before leaning down to kiss me. The kiss was powerful, ravenous even. I'd never felt such intensity from her. I felt weak in her presence. But as I looked into her eyes, something changed. They went from green to red, and the world around me crashed down. "You're not Iris," I said in shock, pushing the mystery woman off me and scrambling against the rock wall behind me. "More clever than most," she replied, her voice gravelly and a growl erupting from her throat. My heart raced as I watched Iris disappear, replaced by a hideous, monstrous crone. Her skin was split and cracked, her hair missing, and sharp yellow teeth pierced her lower lip. Her eyes blazed red, and her mouth began to unhinge, opening wide. A loud howl erupted from her, and my terror gripped me, freezing me in place. "Quinn!" a voice shouted. I turned to my right, relief flooding my chest when I saw Iris, my Iris, sitting a few feet away from me against the rock wall. The creature's attention snapped to her and it crawled toward her. Iris screamed as the creature closed in, its long, black, forked tongue slithering out to run down her face. The creature then pulled back, laughing a deep, sickening laugh as it glared at her. "I can smell it. The child has begun growing inside you," the creature hissed, still laughing. I stared in shock as Iris met my gaze, and tears streamed down her face. "I was planning on telling you at dinner. I was afraid you'd be scared off. We've only been dating a few months and I thought the news would... Iris started to explain, her voice trembling as tears hung like crystals at the corners of her eyes. Iris, it's okay. That's the best news you could have ever given me, I said, my voice filled with emotion. I was going to ask you to move in with me tonight. I guess your news trumps mine. I tried to joke, though tears and laughter mixed together as the horror of our situation sank deeper. The child will make you a much more delicious meal, the creature sneered, unhinging its jaw once again. Iris screamed as it lunged toward her. I didn't think, I just acted. I threw myself forward, pushing Iris out of the way. The creature's teeth sank deep into my side as its claws shredded my chest. No! Iris screamed, but the creature released me and sent me hurtling to the ground. She crawled over to me, flipping me onto my back to check my face. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the blood pouring from my wounds. Why? Why would you do that? The creature asked, shock and awe in its voice. Because I love her. I love her. Love her enough to die for her. I gasped, my breath growing more shallow as the blood loss took its toll. The words I spoke seemed to pierce the night air, and suddenly the creature howled in agony, flinging itself to the ground as pain engulfed it. The creature's body began to shift, transforming in front of our eyes. Just as a brilliant light of white and gold filled the cavern, Iris shielded our eyes. A man stepped out of the light, a chiseled figure glowing with an otherworldly radiance. His piercing eyes scanned the room, taking in the scene before him. Who are you? Iris asked, her voice full of awe. You modern mortals would not believe me, but I am Zeus, the man replied, his voice like thunder. He leaned down as the creature before us continued to transform. The hideous form melted away, and a beautiful young woman appeared in its place. Iris watched in stunned silence as the creature vanished and Zeus gently wiped the blood from the woman's ruby lips. What is happening? Iris asked. You two mortals have freed my love,